am extremely happy to announce that Brandee Sanders is our next speaker. She's going to talk to us about Hyperdrive, the data analytics journey in 600 seconds. And I can't wait because she's going to just wrap up the whole day for us here in the next 600 seconds. Brandee's an award-winning marketing technologist and vice president leading global digital data analytics and demand gen teams from startup and rapid growth to IPO. Featured roles and collaborations with Blackline, Sony, Music, Etsy, New York Times, Gartner, Serious Decisions, Emmy Award-winning media, NASDAQ, and Inc. Magazine Commerce, Data and Storytelling Project. Brandee's speaker sessions and workshops have been seen by a global audience of thousands on stage in online virtual events and numerous podcasts. All right, Brandee, I can't wait to bring you up here. Thank you so much for being patient backstage. I really...
I was going to say, he was actually, I thought he was very chill, and I'm like, I'm an absolute spaz. So this is about to be highly caffeinated. When I say hyperdrive, I mean hyperdrive. So thanks for having me. And yeah, super excited to be here.
Awesome. All right. Well, I'm going to let you take it away, caffeinate this audience that's been sitting with us for the past eight hours. All right. I'm going to hop off and I'll see you in 10 minutes.
Awesome. All right. So 600 seconds. This is going to be rapid fire. Hyperdrive, the data analytics journey. I am Brandee Sanders, Vice President of Marketing with Motive Retail. We are the powerful integrations that are driving the future of global commerce. So super excited to be here. Very excited to talk about the analytics journey. So for anyone who's touched data science, whether you're a newbie or literally like some of the amazing speakers that are here, experts in the field, it's always useful to kind of come back down and look at the different stages. Quite often, and I work in demand gen, and I've kind of worked with engineering, and I've kind of worked with operations a lot over the past few years. Quite often we get, this vision of where we're going to be. And sometimes we overshoot that goal and we're like, hey, listen, I went to a conference, I heard someone talking, they shook their magic 8-ball and went, tomorrow is AI. And, magically you roll in with your team of one or your team of two, and you think you're somehow going from base level Google Analytics reports for your website or your CRM, Salesforce, HubSpot. And tomorrow you're shaking that 8-ball. All signs point to yes, we're suddenly doing machine learning. So I like to kind of level set and strip away the magical veil of what I'll call like buzzwordy bingo that we do a lot in data and a lot in demand gen, and just simplify that journey and kind of like calm the waters and show the entire mapped story, right? Because each of us and the businesses quite often dictate to us when we take new roles or in an organization that goes through what I'll call digital transformation. That was the first buzzword bingo. So you just want to shake the 8-ball. But when you join these organizations, they can all be at different stages. And then even according to roles, the idea of what stage you're in may be dramatically different. The CEO who saw, a bro on Twitter talking about, hey, we're going to do AI tomorrow, wakes up, comes in, and then suddenly from the top down, you have this big initiative that didn't really have legs to stand on. And then from the lower end, you have someone who's literally building regression modeling, or they're doing visualization, and they can kind of see that map, and you have two different opinions coming into the middle. And quite often, I don't know about you guys, but I know from my perspective, there can be dissonance and disagreement on what stage you're in. So at a very base level, I'm going to kind of just walk through these stages and talk about the different bits of chaos and calm and the change management, which a lot of people have already talked about. It's very difficult to get people to change. So we'll talk about some of that. So we'll start, obviously, just identifying what I'll call the simplified Gartner version. Serious Decision has different stages. If you hit Google up and say analytics maturity journey, you're going to see a lot of different things, all the way from, the traditional Gartner to Serious Decision. So I'm just going to base level it to these 4 stages for simplicity's sake, and also time, since we're 600 seconds. So low end, most of us, to be quite honest, unless you have an exceptionally large org or a mature org that's on the flip side of a Fortune 500, tend to live here, which is on the low end. So the majority of folks, when they're coming into their role, a lot of the reporting that you're going to be pulling is quite often hindsight. So how did XYZ do? It's a retrospective, right? It's always looking back. It's never looking forward or saying, how are we using data to influence the planning or our budget or what campaigns we're doing or what projects we're taking on? The majority of people that I've worked with have always kind of started down in hindsight. So if you had for example, an event like we're in right now, you would say, hey, what was the Reg 2 attend attrition rate? And what do you think we can do to improve that next time? So it's all retrospective, i.e., what has happened. And that's base level data that usually you're pulling from enterprise data management, operational reporting, your CRM, your database, et cetera. You don't quite have the gorgeous, depending on opinion, data lake or data dumpster. We'll save that for another day. You don't have that elegant solution yet where you're kind of bringing all of those divisions in. You're very simply saying what happened back there, right? So the majority of organizations tend to kind of live in this area. And in my opinion, the hardest part, and I'm sure there'll be varying opinions on this, to growth is to go from hindsight to insight. Because really what you're doing is you're saying we are going to have data owners who are going to say, why did this happen? Quite often, people don't know why. They can say, well, I know this happened. Like we had like 1,000 visitors to the website, or we had 300 people register for the webinar, but we don't exactly know why the attrition was so terrible, or we don't know why when we targeted XYZ, it didn't work. So being able to move from this first stage to the second stage is a big leap. I think it's one of the biggest paradigm shifts besides all the way at the other end when you have the second big seasonal change coming into things like AI and machine learning. So moving from hindsight, which is going to be descriptive, i.e. what happened, into insight diagnostic, you're able to pull together things like consolidated views, systems and available data. That means your CRM, your marketing automation. If you have things that are different like QuickBooks or some kind of financial software, you're pulling all of these things together and you're basically bringing them in together and bringing up whether it's Tableau or other analytics tools that create powerful visualizations to say, how are these data worlds working together and why did this happen? So you're able to find like literally statistical modeling, regression modeling. You're able to look at what functionally made this happen as opposed to shaking the 8 ball and going, well, we know it happened, but we don't know why. So I think that's when you make that shift from just looking at reports and things that get spit out back to you retroactively to true BI. And that's a huge paradigm shift. And I'm sure everyone who's ever had to try to be the change maker, the advocate for true data literacy or data evangelism at your organization knows what a challenge that is. So moving past that, you go into the next stage, which would be scenario trade-off simulation, foresight, and predictive analytics. This is a hard one. So if you don't have the organizational buy-in, quite often you can't get there. And when I say organizational buy-in, I'm talking about when you've gone past the idea that only 1 or 2 people are handling data. At this point, data is everyone's job, right? Everyone is using data to inform and say what will happen if we do X, and using data to literally make that play. So you have predictive modeling and optimization, business simulations like, hey, if we expand into APAC, XYZ, land and expand, what will that be? If we do an acquisition, what will happen here? If we do a merger, what will happen here? If we expand mid-market enterprise, what would happen here? And basically being able to predictively model that and do an analysis that informs a business decision. And that's really on the latter side of advanced analytics, right? It's pre-K is your data retrospective, and then you made a big leap through middle school. Now you're in your awkward teen years with advanced analytics, because this is where you kind of have a lot of skin in the game, and traditionally you're going to need extra resources. And then lastly, tripping over advanced analytics, you have what will be like the Zen moment, the real folks using amplified intelligence and automation. So prescriptive things, machine learning, natural language. You have all of these complex things that quite often need to have a lot of allocated resources behind them. Those are big budget roles if you're looking at it from a headcount perspective for finance. So it really is, how can we make it happen? At that point, you're saying, here's the vision, here's what it is, how can we make it happen? And that really is what I'll call like the PhD level of analytics. So if you look at it from the base level, from data to BI to advanced analytics, that's a hell of a journey. That's huge. And in the change management aspect, which quite often is overlapping with operations and standardization, templates, codification of language. I feel like I hear Susan is like literally in my head right now. I'm thinking of her coat and her data bit. But like that standardization is massive. So each one of these segments, each one of these bits of journey, they kind of have a few things that are common within each of them. And it's really that you have to know what goals you're looking to achieve. And that's through each silo here. You have to commit resources. That means not just one person just magically takes us from a retrospective GA report into the world of AI. Like you have to commit resources. It's usually a top-down investment, or if it's from the bottom up, you really do have to get executive buy-in because it tends to be a finance item that is huge if you're really moving towards advanced analytics. And then communicating regularly, huge part of all of this, because you have to have a discipline about saying, here's what we're doing now. Here's the language we're using. Here's the report that's necessary. Here's our agreed KPIs. Here's how we're formatting it. Create that muscle memory, and then you're able to scale it and transform it as you move forward. So I think those are things that I love to point out right from the beginning, just to kind of tie all this together, because it is quite a journey. And the human element, I think here, along with operations, often gets overlooked because no one likes change, but change is part of growth. And in order to progress from these levels, there are cultural things that you would have to be looking at in regards to investing in like long-term discipline around data. And I think each of these come with that kind of that big leapfrog moment. So don't underestimate the power of people, because you really do have to have buy-in in order for this to work. And then one other quick thing, because I know we're coming up on time, and Kate, I'm trying to keep it under 600 seconds. One of the other things I love to discuss is the 5 V's of data, because quite often these aspects are tied into those stages. And the stages in our mind, like if I'm looking at it from a marketing operations or a demand gen leadership viewpoint, quite often I'm thinking it's chaos. Like in the beginning, the data is always noisy. I've never walked into an org that had flawless data, and I would be somewhat suspicious if I did. So you come in and it's chaos. And quite often you have to say, okay, how can we create templates? How can we create like standardization, codify the language, define the KPIs, document them, we sign off on them, we make it real. And then moving all of that into an integrated way of working. And then from that point of integration, optimization. And that's how you get that train to go along the bottom line towards advanced analytics. So the 5 V's, I just call this out all the time: value, velocity, veracity, volume, and variety. So, yep, a lot of V's, lots of eye chart business going on here. I'll leave you to look at this later. But I think each of these things go in and get plunked against that journey. Quite often, depending upon your role, you're going to have a certain way of looking at what's important for you, i.e. the data that's important to a CEO or principal co-founder, extraordinarily different than the data that's important to a BDR and SDR, or your engineering, or your QA person, or the person who's in CS and dealing with direct one-to-one client conversations. So I think that when you look at this world where all these data points are coming in and they are raising in so many ways each day, the piles get bigger and bigger. I think it's important to pick out what is important for your organization at the top level. What is the agreed KPI or goal? Why are you using this data to make what decisions? Then below that, how do you standardize it? How do you optimize it? Make sure that we're all agreed on what we're talking about. And then lastly, how do you use it to inform better business decisions and by proxy, drive revenue and retain customers for longer? So that is the entire thing for 600 seconds. I wanted to leave a couple of minutes at the end, Kate, for questions, because I know there's probably going to be a few.
Yes, absolutely. Brandee, thank you so much for that presentation. Really, really enjoyed it. We do have several questions that came in. At first, I want to say I really love your earrings. I know I told you this in the private chat. It looks even better. I love how you dressed for the part. This is awesome.
I feel like, as anyone who's worked in data, like we love to put on a good show. Like we're also just absolutely, we're all the PhD level AI ML. But have I got news for you? If you haven't experienced that chaos where there is no standardization and data is insane, then these might not make sense to you. But to anyone who's ever picked up something and gone, what the hell am I looking at? You shake it, all signs point to yes. Oh, there's no operations. Oh, there's no hygiene. You don't know what governance means. Okay, I get it. So I think that it's tongue in cheek for anyone who's ever had to walk in and unwind a bowl of fish hooks with their data. These earrings are for you.
Oh my God, a bowl of fish hooks. I actually pictured that. That's going to be impossible.
Can't take one out without the other.
On your analytics maturity journey sort of matrix that you've laid out, I wanted to ask, is there a way that companies can tell kind of like which stage am I in? Is there an assessment that they can take or is this sort of like a self-reflection moment for companies to think about?
I think that's a great question. I know there are literally benchmarks that you can look at. Like, i.e., if you're only looking retrospectively, then you know you're in the junior, like pre-K level. But it depends on each org, right? Because the ownership of that data, like who's kind of managing and advocating for data, is going to be a big deal. And that person is usually going, winds at east, and determining, are we moving? And that's the closest I'm gonna get to a TikTok, guys. Is they're able to determine, are we moving progressively, or have we all regressed back to just like getting spit out reports that are totally retro? Are we using data in any way to say XYZ happened, what if, and then? And I think that's a very marker, even for immature orgs to see.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. I really like this question here from Dustin. He says, which phase of the journey is the most challenging to make the jump to?
I think I might have said it already, but if I didn't, it's getting past that first stage, because and this might just be my own biased experience in the many different roles I've worn hats for varying sized orgs throughout many different industries and verticals. More than half, I would say, like 75% of orgs that I've come into, they have the data, and they get it retrospectively, and they're able to look back and say XYZ happened, but they don't use that to make future decisions. Or if they do, it's at a very superficial, almost like a vanity metric level. Like, oh, okay, we saw XYZ happened, maybe we should, and then do that. And then they don't touch it again until the end of the quarter or the end of the year. And then you're looking at something that's already sat there and could have been influencing the past 2 quarters. So I think this is my opinion. I know everyone else is probably going to say it's definitely going to AI because it's such a huge, it's a line item.
That's what I was going to think. Yeah, if you were to ask me, I'd probably guess that one.
I think financially, it's going to be AI and ML, the advanced analytics. But for change management and people, it's moving past retrospective, because that means how they're measured, their KPIs that inform their job, that inform maybe their bonuses or the scope of their JD and their role drastically changes, because now they are owners of data, where previously they might just said, hey, I'm going to email you these PDFs every second Tuesday, and that's it. That's all we do, is we just look retrospectively. So for people, the hardest part, in my opinion, is moving past retrospective and starting to think ahead, because it requires a different way of thinking, a paradigm shift for the org to change manage. And from the finance and business organizational aspect, definitely moving into advanced analytics, because you're looking at a huge investment for long-term discipline around data, and sitting there and evangelizing six-figure data scientists or NLP people, like you're going to have that plan extremely codified in order to pitch that, because it's a huge investment financially.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the question here from Mike touches on this as well. So he's asking, do you find that many companies are trying for the advanced analytics or AI, but some of the low level is needed first?
Yeah, so it's funny because it's almost like, so I danced. And it's funny, I was hoping he would do some kind of interpretive dance, but I danced for a very long time. And as any person who has done anything that requires multiple stages of iteration and training and discipline, running, dancing, acrobats, gymnastics, you name it, you have to start with the base level literacy, which means a PA, which means your base level report. And in that report, why are you reporting on it? What does that data impact? Are you asking the right questions? Is this just something we got spit out because the person who left before you did that? Like basically sitting down and saying, what is the very basic fundamental pieces that go into what we're doing? And I think that that's huge, because each time you learn something more complex, you take a step up and then you advance down that stream. Now, half of the time, maybe a couple of people at like happy hour, they're like, I did a plie once in 1987, and now I'm going to grand jeté through this happy hour, right? So like you think about that, and I think that assumption is bold, but quite often it lacks literally the legs, the transformative legs, and the discipline and the codification to have standardized, templatized, codified, communications are set, everyone has agreed and shook hands on what their job is, what the KPIs are, how we're using the data to inform what we're doing. You really can't get to Big Sur by popping a seed in the ground and then turning around the next day and expecting like a giant tree. It takes time. I think that's something that people quite often, you get C-suite will get like really ramped up. They saw something on Twitter, or they were in, hey, I saw something on Crunchbase, or, I was in, Clubhouse and I heard this person say X. Tomorrow we wake up and it's AI jazz hands. And I think that that's a bit of a folly So it's really important to have people who are like based in reality and can say, if that is our long-term goal and we really do want to get to machine learning and AI, here are the discipline steps that you take to get there. Because when you jump over some of those steps at the end, much like if you built a house with only half the foundation, you are not going to get to hanging up those curtains because the whole thing collapses, which to the point that he mentioned earlier, the speaker right before me, like 75% or greater fail if it's focused only on ML and AI.
Yeah, absolutely.
You don't want to be that statistic. You want to succeed, which means discipline.
You want to be that success metric. I understand.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, Brandee, I want to thank you so much for your amazing presentation. It is finally time to wrap up. Believe it or not, it's been one of the longest days of my life in a good way, but it's been a long day. So thank you again so much, Brandee. Thanks for everybody who kind of, stuck around to the end. Brandee, I'm going to pop you off the screen, but guys, follow Brandee Sanders. I know she posts on LinkedIn. Definitely follow her there. And what else? Instagram, Twitter, anywhere else?
Oh, I would just say you could just come find me on LinkedIn because that's where everyone who's here right now is.
Yes, absolutely. Find her on LinkedIn. All right. Thank you so much, Brandee.